Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C. My name is Ken Balbuena, and I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach at the Shrine. I will be serving as your host and moderator for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us on this Divine Mercy Sunday. Today we are featuring Father John Larson of the Congregation of Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary, also known as the Marians. Father John serves as the assistant to the rector of the National Shrine of Divine Mercy in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Father John Larson grew up just north of Green Bay, Wisconsin. He moved to Florida in 1989 to study and work as a computer programmer until he felt the call to the priesthood. In 1995, Father John joined the Marians. After 10 years of study, he was ordained a priest on February 11, 2006. His assignments include a parish in Plano, Illinois, the Marian House of Studies in Steubenville, Ohio, where he also served as a superior, and now as an assistant to the rector of the National Shrine of the Divine Mercy in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. He co-authored a book named Mother Thrice Admirable, An Introduction to the Mariology of Father Joseph Kentenick. We will have a question and answer period at the end of this webinar, so please be sure to type your questions in the Q&A box below. We will do our best to get through as many of them as possible. We're very pleased to have Father John with us today, so let's get started. Father John, welcome.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks. Good to be here.
All right.
Or there and here at the same time.
Indeed. Now, today is known as Divine Mercy Sunday, which is always the Sunday after Easter Sunday. Now, for those of you, those of the audience here who are not familiar with this wonderful part of the liturgical calendar, can you please tell us a little bit more about what Divine Mercy Sunday and the message of Divine Mercy is all about?
Well, the Divine Mercy Sunday really was something that Jesus wanted according to some private revelations given to us by a sister, a religious sister in the early 20th century. Her name was Helena, and then she became Saint Faustina, Sister Faustina in the convent. And Sister Faustina had private revelations of Jesus and Mary, and she experienced a call from Jesus to proclaim his mercy, which is ironic because she's living in a convent in Poland and doesn't really have access to means of communication much. But the first thing he asks of her is to paint an image, which we can see on this image, the Divine Mercy image, which many people know about. But then right away, when he asked for the Divine Mercy image, he also asked for something called the Feast of Mercy. And he wants the Feast of Mercy to be celebrated on the Sunday after Easter. And he wants her to proclaim this, and he promises great things. In her diary, in the diary of St. Faustina, there is a passage number 699, where he talks about how he desires that this Feast of Mercy be a refuge and shelter for all souls, especially for poor sinners. He says, on that day, the very depths of my tender mercy are open. I pour out a whole ocean of graces upon those souls who approach the fount of my mercy. The soul that will go to confession and receive Holy Communion shall obtain complete forgiveness of sins and punishment. On that day, all the divine floodgates through which gracious flow are opened. Let no soul fear to draw near to me, even though its sins be as scarlet. My mercy is so great that no mind, be it of man or angel, will be able to fathom it throughout all eternity. So he talks about this in the diary, which we see here. That's the actual diary. So Faustina is known to us mainly through her diary, which she was asked to keep from one of her spiritual directors. He asked her to keep a diary of these private revelations, and eventually this diary was published. And now we have that diary which talks about the Feast of Mercy. And her spiritual director, Blessed Michael Sopoćko, tried to get some interest in this idea of a Feast of Mercy already while she was still alive. He wrote to the Vatican, but there wasn't much interest back then. And in fact, Faustina herself said that the message would be as completely undone, which is and it turned out there was a ban on the message because of faulty translations, and they were unable to actually get access to the diary back in the 1950s. And so the message was banned, but she told, and it's in her diary, she told her spiritual director that it would come back. But she said, you and I would already be in the next life when this happens. And he was saddened by that, means that he had to die before it comes back. So he did die in 1976. In 1978, the ban was lifted, and it was lifted by Paul VI, but then shortly after that, John Paul II becomes Pope. And then he gradually, he was already researching her cause when he was Archbishop, and he gradually moves more and more toward implementing the Feast of Mercy, celebrating himself in the 90s, and then finally making it for the Universal Church in the year 2000.
Oh, fantastic. Now, of course, 2000, when he made it part of the Universal Church, it was during the canonization Mass of St. Faustina herself. Yes. And we are celebrating the 25th anniversary, or excuse me, the 20th anniversary of her canonization this year. It actually was, it'll be April 30th, will be exactly 20 years.
Yeah.
And during that Mass, he actually had a very interesting quote, St. John Paul II, that is, he said that the Divine Mercy was revealed between World War I and World War II. And he said, quote, those who were witnesses and participants in the events of those years and the horrible sufferings they caused for millions of people know well how necessary was the message of mercy. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. But how exactly did the message of divine mercy really come to the Marians or come to the United States?
Well, so Blessed Michael Sapachko ended up giving some information to a Marian priest who he was from Poland, Father Joseph Jarzembowski, and he was wanted by the Nazis. He was considered kind of a social elite, you might say. He was known in Poland. He was known for writing and poetry and such. And so the Nazis had him on a list to get rid of. So he escapes through Lithuania and through with the Soviet Union and even through Japan in 1941, in May of 1941, before the United States is at war with Japan and the rest. And he is able to travel, and it's rather miraculous that he's able to travel all the way across these places. He has an expired visa to go to the United States, but he manages to get through there, and he ends up able to come to Washington State and then travel across the U.S. to his community in Washington, D.C. And he promises, if he makes it, that he will spread the message of divine mercy, because he's not sure about it, but he prays to Jesus' divine mercy through this trip, and there's many miraculous things that happen. And so he ends up being a very strong promoter of the message of divine mercy. He ends up being someone who is very on fire with this, and he becomes the first Marian promoter, and then he convinces other Marians to promote it as well.
Excellent. Now, we are very fortunate at our shrine that we have the Congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy. It's the same order as St. Faustina. They're serving at the St. John Paul II National Shrine, and obviously the message of divine mercy is very important to them. Actually, here we see an image of her diary there, which, by the way, I believe this diary is on sale through the Marians, and it's also on sale at a gift shop through St. John Paul II National Shrine. If you're able to make it to the shrine whenever we reopen, you can purchase it right there. The sisters are very good here for us. They celebrate the hour of mercy every day at 3 o'clock, which includes meditation inspired by St. Faustina's diary and praying of the Divine Mercy Chaplet. They also to various audiences, but really resonate a lot with young people. And every day on the 22nd of the month, which is February 22nd, when St. Faustina received the message of divine mercy. So every 22nd of the month, they lead a program that's called Evenings with the Merciful Jesus, which in particular has a very dedicated following, especially attracting a lot of young people across the street from us at Catholic University. The sisters are also very instrumental in bringing over, during the March for Life, some 2 relics of St. Faustina, which we're going to see here in a moment. So 2 relics of St. Faustina. It was a piece of her bone and also some of her habit that were displayed inside of the special reliquary. is actually only the fourth time since 2016 that they have been on public display. But since they're normally normally housed at the Sisters Convent in Boston, Massachusetts, just on the other side of the state from you, Father, it's very special that these relics were here at the shrine since it's the 20th anniversary of St. Faustina's canonization, but it's also the 40th anniversary of St. John Paul II's encyclical, and I know you'll correct me if I mispronounce it here, Dives in Misericordia.
Yeah, yes, actually the 40th anniversary, yes, which was his first reference to divine mercy in a big way. He doesn't reference Saint Faustina in that, but he said to people that he was thinking of her when he wrote the encyclical being looking at divine mercy through scripture and tradition and liturgy and things like that. But a very profound encyclical, very profound and always worth reading. It's great meditation material.
One thing that many people may not know is that the second miracle attributed to her canonization, or to her intercession that led to her canonization, actually took place here in the United States. It was in Baltimore, Maryland, at the Church of the Holy Rosary. And I always throw this picture up there because my wife and I happened to fortuitously get married at Holy Rosary Catholic Church in Baltimore, Maryland. And here you see an image of what that church looks like. And while you are the National Shrine of Divine Mercy, Father, there's Baltimore has their diocesan Shrine of Divine Mercy that's at this particular parish.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a beautiful parish. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, since we're talking a little bit about the shrines, can you please tell me a little bit about what you all do at the National Shrine of Divine Mercy in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, to celebrate Mercy Sunday? And in particular, I think that the Mass is usually televised, but maybe a little bit different this year.
Yes, normally, well, for the past, since 1990, I think it's been televised live, so that's 30 years now. Yes, but the Marians celebrated it unofficially back in the 1950s with a small group. In the early 80s, unofficially, we started semi-officially celebrating Mercy Sunday at the shrine about 1982 or 83, and we would have a full shrine, and then it was moved to an outdoor altar in a little grove of trees, but the altar had no covering. There was a St. Francis Grove, which is near the shrine. And then they started making what's called field altars, little A-frame altars that had at least a little covering in 1988, I believe. And that was out in that field there. There was a little A-frame. And then finally, in 2000, I can't remember exactly, 6 or 7, somewhere around there, we built the that's called the Mother of Mercy outdoor shrine. And it's a nice big outdoor shrine, but not anywhere near what we need normally for handling the pilgrims on Divine Mercy Sunday. We've gotten between 15 and 20,000 pilgrims many times over the course of the last few years, and we've had huge pilgrimages, many people from surrounding areas, lots of buses, and often bad weather. That happens to be pictures of good weather, but that is a rarity. Often quite bad weather. Today is actually pretty nice if we had pilgrims, but of course we don't. We have a few people outside doing Stations of the Cross outside, but we can't open the church, and we couldn't have a public celebration, of course. So this year, ironically, the celebration was back inside the shrine, which it hasn't been since the 1980s. But that's because we can't have a big celebration. But so we did have the EWTN broadcast of Mercy Sunday, but it was from inside the shrine with just a few priests. And so it was, unfortunate, but at the same time, at least we were able to have it and televise it. And so it continues, and God willing, next year we'll have another big outdoor celebration.
Excellent. Here's a view from inside the shrine, and this is not from this year, but it's from a past year, and this is actually a mutual friend of ours, Father Bob Vanetti, who actually connected the two of us together, and I'm sure Father Bob will be very happy that I'm using this photo of him, and I sort of say that in a little bit of in a fun way, because Father Bob's a good guy, but he was very humble and was like, no, I think there's a better person for this podcast or for this webinar than me, so But anyhow, so this is good to hear that you're still celebrating Divine Mercy Sunday, even though we have a little bit unique different circumstances this year, and it's unfortunately we can't have it like we normally celebrate it. But it's good that we are still celebrating it nonetheless. Now, before we go on to the next one, I just want to roll we do have some questions that we would love to be able to answer. So that at the bottom of your screen, there is a little box for questions and answers. So just make sure that you type in any questions that you want and do as many as possible. But yeah, so we have a lot of questions right now. So Father John here. All right, now, Father, St. John Paul II, of course, was Polish, just like St. Faustina, and he saw her canonization process all the way through, from opening it up from when he was Archbishop of Krakow to beatifying and canonizing her when he was Pope. He obviously had a very strong devotion to the message of divine mercy. And in fact, when he died on April 2nd, 2005, it was fitting that it was on the vigil of Divine Mercy Sunday. Now, can you tell me maybe a little bit why it was important for him to add Divine Mercy Sunday to the liturgical calendar?
Well, he first heard about the message during World War II. He first heard about Faustina from a fellow underground seminarian. He was going to seminary secretly during the time the Nazis controlled Poland. So he heard about her message, and he would walk past the convent where she was, her grave was. And it said he would even sometimes pray before her grave and pray at that convent. Sometimes he would come there, and this was on the way to work while he was working at a chemical plant. And then after that, he would go to the same place as bishop and archbishop. And people told him, even though there was the ban on the message, that he should open her cause to investigate, if the ban was worthy. And so he did in the 1960s. In 1965, he talks about starting her cause. He closes the process in 1967 on her, and then she is made servant of God in 1968. He then is favorable to her. He has theologians investigate her work, and that helps lift the ban. The ban is lifted before he's Pope, but it's lifted in part because he has theologians investigate her writings. And then he becomes Pope about 6 months after the ban is lifted, and that allows him to do a lot more to promote her, not only beatifying her, canonizing her, but also fulfilling the most important thing that Jesus talks about. Jesus really wants the Feast of Mercy, and we call it this, it's a solemnity, so Mercy Sunday. So that becomes the most important thing. And in fact, on the day of her canonization, the day he proclaims Divine Mercy Sunday for the world, he says to a doctor, he says, "This is the happiest day of my life." So he is very happy to have fulfilled this. He talks about in different points that he sees this as a image of his pontificate. He already talks about divine mercy as an image of his pontificate. He talks about, says, "Right from the beginning of my ministry in St. Peter's, I considered this message of divine mercy my special task. Providence has assigned it to me in the present situation of man, the church, and the world. It could be said that precisely this situation assigned that message to me as my task before God." So he saw this as primary, to lead the church into the new millennium, but as he does that, to fulfill this desire of Jesus according to the private revelations of St. Faustina. I can't hear you right now, so I don't know what happened here.
Yeah, sometimes it helps when you unmute yourself.
Okay, there you go.
All right. I did see also a quote in St. Faustina's canonization mass. It says here that St. John Paul II says, "Thus the message of divine mercy is also implicitly a message about the value of every human being.
Mhm.
Each person is precious in God's eyes. Christ gave his life for each one. To everyone, the Father gives his Spirit and offers intimacy. And of course, that's a great connection, I think, even though he didn't quite say it this way. I think it's a great connection to his encyclical Evangelium Vitae. And just a
Mhm.
couple of days, about a month, less than a month ago, on March 25th, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of his writing of Evangelium Vitae.
Mhm.
And of course, the big message there, Jesus, I trust in you, that we always say, and when we see the image of divine mercy, St. John Paul II said that this simple act of abandonment to Jesus dispels the thickest clouds and lets a ray of light penetrate every life. I think that's a very important message, especially given the circumstances of what we're experiencing today. Wouldn't you agree,
Mhm.
Father?
Oh yeah, yeah. His defense of life and his message about respect for human life, and certainly in the encyclical Dives Misericordia, also he is already talking about the anxiety of people in the present situation, and how there's a lack of mercy in the world, and how more mercy in the world, more mercy among us helps us to respect human life better.
Excellent. All right, we do have a couple of questions that are here in the chat window, but before we get into those questions, can you please tell me a little bit about the Marian Fathers, and maybe anything that you want to share about them? I'll let you take the floor now.
Okay. Well, the Marians, we were founded in 1670, so we're actually celebrating our 350th anniversary. We were founded in Poland, and we have our founder became a saint just recently, Saint Stanislaus Papczynski. We're known in the U.S. for the Divine Mercy message, particularly, but we also were founded to promote the devotion to the Immaculate Conception, which at that time was not yet a dogma, and also to pray for the souls in purgatory, and to assist the clergy. So we have ministries around the world. We're growing in Africa. We're growing in Brazil. We are, of course, in Poland is the main part, and Eastern Europe. That's where there's a lot of Marians. We're still pretty small in the U.S., but we're known for a lot of different things in the U.S. Both Father Don Calloway and Father Michael Gately, well-known authors, and Father Seraphim, who helped promote Faustina's cause. He's up here. So we're known for all different things, but we're still primarily in Eastern Europe.
All right. And now you mentioned that you promote the Immaculate Conception. If I recall correctly, at least in our area here, the ordinations take place just down the road from us at the Basilica of the National Shrine of Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, we're practically across the street from you there. So I was studying there while that building was going up. I was there right when it opened, in fact.
Yeah, I read on the internet here that that's actually where you had your reception following
Yes,
your organization.
back when it was the cultural center on the third floor. Yeah, that's where we had the reception. Yep.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Excellent. All right, well, we do have some questions here. If you don't mind, Father, I'd love to ask them, and we can get right into them.
Mhm.
So one question we have here is, how is the plenary indulgence of Divine Mercy Sunday different from any other plenary indulgence?
Well, that's a little complicated. So St. John Paul II did issue plenary indulgences for Divine Mercy Sunday, which have much less requirements. If someone is, say, ill and infirm, he just makes, they just have to do a few little things. And of course, ideally get to confession and communion when they can, if they are able to. So he made the plenary indulgence very simple to get, but the promise in the diary is not technically a plenary indulgence. It's a promise from Jesus that basically it's like a plenary indulgence, but even better, because a plenary indulgence requires all detachment from sin, which means you have a pure heart. It means it requires complete purity of heart to get a plenary indulgence. So some mystics have said very few people actually get plenary indulgences because they don't have complete purity of heart. But this Divine Mercy promise it's the same type of thing. You're completely forgiven of all sins and all punishment, which means no purgatory. And at the same time, you don't have to have complete detachment from sin. So it's a complete starting over in a certain sense. But St. John Paul II gets the promise. He receives communion just before he dies on the Vigil of Mercy Sunday, and they celebrated it as the Vigil of Mercy Sunday. And so he implemented the promise for the whole world. I mean, it was already there, but he implemented it, and then he gets it, which is a wonderful thing. It's kind of a just thing to happen there, you could say.
Excellent. All right. Now we got another question here. So, Father, could you please speak about the similarities between the face of Jesus in the original Divine Mercy image and the face of Jesus in the Shroud of Turin? Maybe even kind of tied to that a little bit is talking a little bit about the different types of images that are found for Divine Mercy.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that paintings that have been done of what Faustina talked about. The first one was done by a man who Blessed Sabachko knew. He lived in the same apartment complex with him. He actually tried to do the painting many times. Faustina was not happy. But finally, she said, well, it's good enough. And Jesus said, it's good enough. So it turns out that image corresponds to the shroud in terms of the face quite a lot, and many points of similarity. And there are different videos about this showing that this original Divine Mercy image corresponds to the Shroud of Turin. So it's an interesting fact. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. In one sense, it's not. It could be miraculous. I mean, we can't say it's miraculous, but it seems miraculous because it's highly unlikely that he had a copy of the shroud to work from, and even then, how would he project it or how would he work with it? But regardless, there is this connection. So if you see the two of them and they kind of go between them, they're clearly, it's the same person, kind of.
Excellent. All right, now one person wrote here that I pray the novena, I pray the Divine Mercy, I pray the novena for Divine Mercy. However, I don't fully understand where the novena fits into Divine Mercy Sunday. Would you be able to explain that? And thank you.
So the novena was given to Faustina as a preparation specifically for her to pray. And Jesus never says for everybody else to pray the novena, but we do it because she put it in the diary and it seems like a good idea. It's a preparation for her specifically, and it's mainly focused on the same petitions that are on the Good Friday. There's these famous Good Friday petitions where we stand and kneel. Let us stand, let us kneel. And they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. And so the novena starts on Good Friday and ends on the day before Divine Mercy Sunday. So it's taking the Good Friday petitions, and then she is to pray a chaplet for each of these petitions. And so it takes those Good Friday petitions, which are done on one day, extends them out through the days from Good Friday through Easter Sunday and into the days of the octave. And so Jesus wants her to pray for these different intentions, but specifically stretching them out day by day. And like I said, there's not exactly the same, but they're close to the intentions of Good Friday. And so when she's to pray, have mercy on us in the whole world, it's for each of these groups. So as I said, the diary never says, and Jesus never says, I want everybody to pray this novena. But at the same time, it seems like a good idea to prepare. She is given this to prepare. And so it seems like a good idea for us to prepare in the same way.
Well, speaking of preparation, one person comments here that I teach 5th grade CCD, and of course, preparing kids in the Catholic faith here. Would you summarize Divine Mercy as if you were speaking to a 10-year-old child? He says that he explains that mercy is when love meets suffering, and Divine Mercy is when God's love meets our suffering because of sin through the sacraments and Divine Mercy Sunday.
Well, mercy is getting something you don't deserve. can say that for sure. So mercy is someone giving us something freely and specifically that we don't deserve. If we get something that we deserve, that's justice. If we get something we don't deserve, that's mercy. Get something good, I should say. If we get something good, if we get something bad we don't deserve, that's injustice. If we get something good that we don't deserve, it's mercy. And so if we get something good, and that's what God gives us lots of good things that we don't deserve. And divine mercy, the message is specifically looking at the fact that God forgives us everything. He keeps forgiving us and forgiving us. And we're called also to forgive others. We're supposed to be like God in that way, to be merciful as our Heavenly Father is merciful. And so getting things we don't deserve, that happens all the time. But getting good things, I should say. And so I think it's important to recognize that that's sort of the root. Is it's undeserved goodness, and undeserved love, undeserved anything good that's good for us. Because we could get something good, like say we get $1 million, and then we end up doing it ends up ruining us. Well, that's not really mercy. That's not really mercy. So mercy is getting something that's truly good for us.
Indeed. All right, we do have a question here in the chat window. Did Saint Faustina, did she experience a stigmata?
She experienced an invisible stigmata. I don't think there's any case of visible, but she does talk about in the diary of experiencing the pains of the wounds on Good Friday and around that time. She experiences certain pains at certain times, but we don't know of any case of her having a visible stigmata.
Okay. All right, and final question that we have over here for the afternoon is, how can we obtain an indulgence if one of the steps is confession, but we physically cannot meet with our confessors at this time? I think confession during this time has been a very much broader question than just in relation to the indulgence here, but can you answer that, please?
Well, when one principle is God cannot expect the impossible. So if we can't get to confession, we should make an act of contrition, and the Catechism talks about, for those who cannot get to confession, they should make an act of contrition with the intention of getting to confession when they are able to. So we shouldn't just, an act of contrition is not a cop-out, but it is the intent. Part of the act of contrition is, I firmly resolve with help of grace to confess my sins when I can. That's the idea. And do penance. So I always use the principle, God cannot expect the impossible. That's a good principle to have. So in fact, Faustina experiences that a lot. Jesus says, okay, you do this, you tell the world about my mercy. Does he give her the ability to tell his mercy to the world? Not really in her lifetime. No, he doesn't. But now, here we are at a webinar, we're talking about the stuff. So he says, you tell the world about my mercy, and it continues to happen more and more.
Excellent. All right. Well, those are all the questions, and that's all the time that we have for now. So I want to thank you again, Father John Larson of the National Shrine of Divine Mercy, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope that all of you in our virtual audience have enjoyed this webinar brought to you by the St. John Paul II National Shrine. And while the shrine is currently closed because of the coronavirus impact, we are planning several future online events to help bring the shrine to you, including our next webinar, which is scheduled for May 2nd. Topic will be released very soon. Please be sure to visit our website or follow us on social media, including YouTube, to learn more about upcoming virtual events, to view exclusive content, to stream Mass online, as well as at the Hour of Mercy. And I thank you again for joining us. God bless all of you. Stay safe and be well.